Thank you so much. He has been instrumental in setting this space for us. So for those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome. We meet on a monthly basis, talk about issues and opportunities, as well as lived experiences of those from the LGBTQIA plus community, which includes many of you, and others are here to lean in and learn and to be great supporters of the work. So I want to turn it over to our coordinator for community impact and equity initiatives, Miss Abby Janis, and then also introduce our Chief People and Learning Officer, Kelly Braniff. Abby?
Good morning, all. Yeah, I'd love to introduce myself. My name is Abby Janis, and as Dawn mentioned, I am the program coordinator at the Center for Nonprofit Management. If you have any questions or anything that you'd love to bring up for our organization, you're welcome to email me. I'll throw my email into the chat. And we want to welcome you here today. It's a wonderful month in celebration, and we are excited to kick off our collective impact and celebration of this amazing community. Kelly? Catherine, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. And I have my amazing co-host right here today. I'm Catherine Swanton. I'm the Senior Manager of Marketing and Special Events at CNM. And this is my adorable cat, Maxie, who is enjoying the spotlight today. Thank you all for attending.
All right. Well, I know Kelly may have stepped away for a moment, but once she gets back here, we would like for her to introduce herself as well. But we want to go ahead and we will start as soon as Phil arrives in the space in approximately 1 minute. But one thing we'd like to do is make sure, one second, making sure that we get everything done and we open our meetings in a very intentional way. So we will be here today from 9:30 until 3. So we do have baked in breaks. So those are here, and we're going to ask that if you want, in the bottom of your machine, your computer, whatever you're using, your device, there is a share button. Feel free to invite your friends into this space. They can come and go as they please. So you would just go to your participants button and click on invite and send someone the link. So we want to encourage you to do that today. And I want to go ahead and open up this meeting the way that we should by giving our land acknowledgement. I want to acknowledge our gratitude for being able to live and work on this sacred ground belonging to the Native ancestors of the Cherokee Nation, Chickasaw, Creek, Natchez, Shawnee, and Yuchi. May our work in this space today demonstrate a commitment to justice, equity, truth, and peacemaking through shared storytelling and rituals shared by Indigenous and African and Asian and Native people. We at CNM are committed to equity, inclusion, justice, and belongingness. We want to thank all of our consultants, our researchers, our curators, our speakers, our many guests today representing a plethora of spaces. And thank you all for bringing truth and light to the work around LGBTQIA plus community members. We also want to make sure that we are intentional in reversing the curse of systems of oppression that continue to prevent liberation of marginalized people around the world. So without further ado, we are going to get ready for this space. So let me ask if Miss Kelly has returned. She may have stepped away.
We have some more CNM staff on the call that I'm excited
we do?
to introduce.
Awesome.
Abby Dugan is in the room.
Hi, Abby Dugan. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself and then?
Hi, everyone. My name is Abby Dugan. I am the membership coordinator at the Center for Nonprofit Management. I'm part of the LGBT community, and I'm really excited to be here today.
Thank you, Abby. Now, I would like to use the popcorn method. We're still waiting on Phil to join us, and I'd like to see who is here. So I know I've asked you to put it in the chat, but if you don't mind, and I use popcorn, that's anybody who wants to talk. You're not required to. You can sit here, lean in and listen. But if you'd like to share time and voice in the space, now is the time to do that. And I would like to say, especially, no pressure, Dr. Robin, would like to have you speak up and talk about your book as well, because we all need a copy.
Thank you. Super glad to be here. Love being in community with the Center for Nonprofit Management. I'm Dr. Robin, and my pronouns are they, them. I'm non-binary, transgender, Latinx, and hold those identities very close to my heart and try to steward ethical futures from an intersectional place of being mixed race. I did just write a book called Body Becoming, A Path to Our Liberation. And, really, I just try to tell story and translate political theory and theology and ethics into what I call politicized narrative. And the real sort of main point and thesis of the book is that the better we are connected with our bodies, the better we are connected with other people, and that can reshape our democracy in very tangible ways. And that's a little bit about me. I'm excited to be here and be in conversation with folks, and look forward to seeing y'all around town in Pride.
Thank you, Dr. Robin. And go ahead and drop that link in the chat. And this is for any of you. This is our space. This is the only way that we can share, learn, and connect. Like Dr. Robin said, you've got something you want to share, events, please put them in the chat. Who else would like to speak up? Yes, I may unmute.
I'll say I'll be happy to speak if I could figure out the whole mute thing. You would think 2 years in I would know how to do this by now. But my name is Ami Sadler. I am the education and training manager for People 3. We are a diversity, equity, and inclusion firm located in Nashville, Tennessee. I also serve on the board of Nashville Launchpad, also Awake Nashville. I'm a student at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville in the Bachelor Social Work program. I also am a survivor advocate at the Sexual Assault Center here in Nashville, and I get to present at CNM a few times a year for various DEI conversations and topics. And I am part of the LGBTQIA community, and I also have children who are part of the LGBTQIA community as well.
Thank you, Ami. Yay. I love having all of my people here in the space. Y'all are so yummy. Who else? And thank you, Kim, for dropping your info in the chat, and those of you who have done it. Anyone else want to speak up and speak out?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Oscar Harrell, and I work for Ingram. Hi, Amy. I am doing work with her, so I know and appreciate her very much. So thank you for sharing. I lead DEI and employee engagement for Ingram. So I consider myself an ally, and I am obviously trying to learn as much as I can in this vast area. I just took on a full-time role in the DEI space. I've been working in it through my efforts in HR, and then also the DEI committee here with Ingram over the last couple of years. And prior to that, with a different company in the Tennessee area with Mars Pet Care. So, just trying to learn as much as I can to help create an inclusive and thriving environment in our workplace and in our communities. I live in Paducah, but I used to live here in Tennessee for about 8 years. But I am working here in Nashville about 3 days a week at our downtown location. That's a little bit about me. Thank you, and grateful to be here.
Wonderful, thank you.
I'd like to welcome Phil to the Zoom room.
Yes.
Hello, everybody. Sorry for my tardiness. I'm glad to be here with all of you today. I will be on video here in a short bit, but please continue with the introductions if you haven't. And I will be on with you shortly to have this great conversation today as part of our LGBTQ plus convening.
Thank you. Who else would like to speak? Sheila?
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. I'm running late as well. I'm coming from a doctor's appointment. It should be in my office here shortly so I can participate fully. I am the VP of HR for the YWCA of Nashville, Middle Tennessee. And of course, this is part of our mission to make sure everyone in the community feels welcomed and supported. And so, of course, I'm just here to make sure that I am always learning and always getting ideas to make sure that we walk that mission. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Sheila. Important work you are doing there as well.
Hi, Dawn. I'll introduce myself.
Yes, Adele.
My name's Adele Chazen. I'm the CEO for Chazen & Company. We are an accounting firm that provides outsourced accounting services and CFO and advisory services to nonprofit organizations exclusively. And we as an employer, obviously, are always looking at how to better our DEI initiative. And obviously it expands past race, and I'm very interested in learning today. And this is a topic that I'm very interested in. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Adele. Thank you for being here. Who else? If no one else wants to do big introductions, we do want to say hello, Ashley, Shamika, representatives from Gideon's Army, Olivia, Marissa, Christina, Bethany, Melody, Abby, Victor. Did I already say Shamika? Ray, and Nikki. We thank you all for being here and sharing space with us as well. And Kristen, you know, we love the work at Persistent Nashville. Good stuff working with all of you. So Phil is actually going to take us on a journey today with a number of people. So what I will do as he is getting set up is really take us through what the agenda will look like for today. We want to encourage you to stick around for all of these amazing talks, but if for some reason you have to step away, just know that this will be recorded and available to you. All right, so our first session is queer plus trans people of color, what pride means to them and what they want you to know. That is going to be until approximately 10:45. Then we will have a 15-minute break, come back in at 11 o'clock, and we will be in conversation, creating a better future for all LGBTQ plus people in the South. And as you know, those of you who may be natives and those of you who are transplants learn very quickly what it's like to be gay, bi, or non-binary in the South. Welcome. We welcome you. My daughter feels it every day, even in her own family, who likes to hold interventions every holiday. But anyway, session 3 comes at 2 o'clock, 2 to 3. We will talk about privilege, power, and pride, intersectionality within the LGBTQ plus community. So we are happy to have all of you here. And yes, Kristen, Alabama, we have a problem. So this is going to be a day full of information and knowledge. All of you who are in this call, this is a shared space. We will be using polls. We will be using breakout rooms. We will have an opportunity to share. We just really want you to lean in, be willing to learn, relearn, and unlearn maybe some habits. So we thank the Oscars and the Adeles for being here on behalf of their agencies, for Sheila and others of you who are in this space, not only to be more, but to learn more and to live and love more as well. All right. So we appreciate you. And Phil, we are ready whenever you are ready, my friend.
All right, thank you all so very much. Today's conversation, and I'm sorry for the delay on my video, but some things out of my control this morning that I couldn't do. So on that note, I want to do a quick round of hellos and thank you for joining us today as part of the LGBT plus convening LGBTQ plus convening here on the the virtual convening of LGBT plus folks here in Nashville. What we are going to be doing today is having a really great conversation around a number of different topics. And today's first conversation is featuring some really important voices in the room. And so I am thrilled to have with us today Dr. Robin Henderson Espinoza, Amy Sadler, Marissa Richmond, and Ray Holloman, who's not on screen, all of whom are going to be sharing some really important details about the queer and LGBTQ plus lived experience here in the South and what really pride means to them. And so today, I'm going to start with one question, and I'd like to go round robin with our panelists and start with this one very simple question. What does pride mean to you? Dr. Robin, I'll let you take it off.
Thank you. My first Pride that I attended was in the city of Chicago when I was also a seminary student. And I was in my mid-20s, and I had moved to Chicago from Texas. And, all of a sudden, this was way before corporations took over Pride. This is like 20 years ago. And so, I saw this sort of, quite literally, a rainbow of people existing in harmony. And I thought, that's another possible world. These are my people. And, over the years, Pride festivals have become much more corporatized and whatnot. But really for me, it was a community event over the span of about 6 blocks in the city of Chicago. And I got to see all sorts of kind of people. And, as a young person who was still figuring out my gender stuff and my sexuality stuff, and also in grad school. So I'm also have like access to this academic knowledge, seeing people free was something that was very appealing to me. And I've tried to embody that both in my academic work and in my political life. Still I'm trying to find where the community spaces where Pride can really be and become, instead of the more corporatized Pride functions that only privilege a certain class of people or a certain racial demographic. And really Chicago, I went from Chicago to Denver and saw a whole new sort of fold of Pride, and then to San Francisco Pride, where I took my first faculty post and, saw things that I had never seen before in San Francisco. And I say that kind of jokingly, but there is something to being the people we are called to be, and not reducing ourselves to whatever the crumbs on the table, if you will. And Pride for me is about freedom of expression and a radical sense of belonging in community. And I hope that Nashville can foster that in some way. Thank you.
Since it popped up that I'm being highlighted, I guess it's my turn. When I think about what Pride means to me, it's multifaceted. Of course, there's the big parties and events, opportunities to meet and be and see. But in my day-to-day, everyday, Pride to me is just being who I am. There was a lot of time that I spent, especially growing up, where I wasn't open about my family. I didn't have pictures of my partner or my family out at work. People at school didn't know who I was. I came out in high school and I had slurs spray painted on my locker. So I couldn't have pride then. It was scary and there wasn't a support system. But as I've gotten older, pride is just being me and accepting what that means in all the spaces that I am. Understanding that sometimes my partner and I can't hold hands when we're out in public. And other times we can hug and do express PDA like everyone else can. But it's also important for me, in my definition of pride, is to make sure my daughter's comfortable to be who she is, to make sure her friends are able to be who they are. When her friends come in the house, the first thing I yell is pronoun check, so I can be respectful. And for me, like, that's my pride. Everywhere I am, everything I do, being 100% me, and knowing that, especially in some places, that's going to be difficult, but doing it anyway. And yes, the parties are fun. I used to perform and I would be at every pride on the stage, throwing things, like all of that fun. But as I've gotten older, I've realized it's more than the parties and the fun, shot necklaces and throwing beads. It's being able to be authentically myself everywhere I am.
Thank you, Amy. Marissa, can you share a little bit about what pride means to you?
Sure. Well, growing up here in Middle Tennessee, I'm a native of Nashville. There were no resources, no support infrastructure. We're alone and isolated. So pride is an opportunity to be out, and it's an opportunity to speak out, but it's also an opportunity to party. And I've seen sort of the full gamut of it over many years. And so, pride is important, sort of to show the colors, and especially the expansion of pride with so many celebrations around Middle Tennessee now, and to see the newcomers and the young people coming out. It's really exciting, and to realize that the world I grew up in has changed, and that they're able to express themselves in ways that I didn't feel comfortable doing when I was their age, and that's what really is important to me.
Thank you, Marissa. Ray.
I think for me, pride really is about the visibility. Pride is one of the places where I first learned about, people could be transgender, because growing up here in Nashville, that's just not something that I knew about. It was not something that we talked about in school or anything like that. And so it was really about the visibility and seeing that I was not stuck in this identity that I didn't feel myself in, and that I could transition to be my actual true self. And now I've taken that, and now I'm able to be visible for the people who can't be. There's a lot of trans people out here that are relatively stealth, because we are still in the South. And so some people have to, keep it more quiet. And so, but I've been fortunate to work for companies and have the ability to be more visible. And so that has also really been really crucial for me, is just being able to show, younger people that, yes, there is a world out here. Like, you may have to be in the closet in high school, but, once you get out and on your own, you have the ability to become your true self. And I just want to apologize right now, everybody. I'm going to have to step away at 10:15, but I'm really grateful to be in this conversation with you all today.
Thank you so much, Ray. I think that was really powerful. Marissa, thank you too. Thank you all very much for sharing that first round. I think what's interesting when we're looking at the story of Pride and the importance of it in its current iteration, there is so much change that has happened just in a short number of years in terms of acceptance for people in our community. And I'd like to talk a little bit about the history. And I think what's interesting here is that we have people who have lived in Nashville for so long. And so there's been an evolution of acceptance for LGBTQ plus people over our time here. And so one of the things that I would love to hear from specifically from Amy, Marissa, and Ray, what I would love to hear from you specifically is let's talk a little bit about what the lived experience for LGBTQIA plus people in Nashville, in Middle Tennessee was 15, 20 years ago, and then how it's evolved and changed today. I know you touched on it, some of that with, you know, the Pride movement, but let's move a little bit beyond that, right? The day-to-day experience, the lived experience, and what that looked like, and then compare it to what it's like today. And pull no punches, like, you know, pull the Band-Aid off. If it sucks still, let's talk about that. I know it does. So let's talk about that. Amy, you look like you're about to say something, so I'm going to toss it right to you.
First, let me just say that it is extremely stressful that I can say 20 years ago and not be talking about when I was like 5 or 6 years old. I just want to put that out there. But no, 20 years ago, it was a completely different space. I was sneaking out to go to the club. I was out to certain people in my family. I had other people in my family who I couldn't be out to. When my mom outed me at church, it became this thing. And like, she railed back in the church and yelled and threw her arms up and said, "My baby's gone to the devil." And it was insane. And I was like, why is this happening? I had been part of a national youth organization within the church. I spoke at the United Nations. I traveled around the country to talk about being part of that particular religious organization. And as soon as I was outed to the church, I was done. I was shunned. I would come into church and no one would talk to me. And the pastor eventually asked me not to come back. I was doing work with the youth organization, and I couldn't work with the youth and young adults anymore. I had my marriage license on my desk at one point, not in a frame, not up or out anywhere, just on my desk for something. And my boss told me that I was flaunting my sexuality. It was a lot, and it was scary because I didn't feel safe. And now it's slightly better. And I say slightly because I still have to have conversations with my partner. I still have to have conversations with my daughter about her safety. And it's hard because I want her to be out and I want her to be proud and I want her to live her best life. But she can't do that everywhere. And the fact that we have to have conversations about whether or not she looks too gay for certain spaces is sad and it's terrifying. And I just have an immense amount of fear for her as she moves through the world. And I think parents or even people with nieces or nephews or just young people they care about, I think they have probably the same fear because it's different. We grew up not talking about it, and they're growing up in a space where everyone talks about it. But it's still hard to manage safety in spaces where we can't guarantee it. And I know that's part of a larger conversation about not being safe anywhere, but just having multiple identities and the intersection of those identities, making you a bigger and larger target is just hard.
It's a tough pill to swallow, Amy. Marissa.
Yeah, well, a lot of the work that I've done has been political, and so I like to. I'll start by thinking, going back to the start of this century, when we all survived the Y2K bug, we had no rights. We could not be out in the workplace. We could be fired anywhere. Access to healthcare was basically non-existent for many of us, and in the trans community, that's very important. Hate crimes were not being reported. We were invisible. Maybe the police harassment that led to the Stonewall riots and the other riots of the 60s, that part had ended. But there was still a lot of harassment. And, that much has changed. But, our relationships weren't being recognized. Our identities were not recognized. There was just nothing, absolutely nothing. And especially for the transgender community. Things had started to move in a few states, not in Tennessee, but certainly for those of us who are transgender, we were basically at ground zero everywhere. And we were being excluded in many places, including right here in Nashville in the fight for equality. And we had to kick the door down and demand our seat at the table, demand that we be heard. And, there's less of that now, but there's still a lot of fights that are going on, and especially in our state legislature. And we're seeing trans youth being demonized and attacked on so many levels. And, but we have made some progress, especially in the workplace. And unfortunately, I'm in academia, so we're a little better off than maybe some private employers. In the past 20 years, we've seen some heady progress, but we've also seen some real punches in the gut.
I think that's an interesting point that you bring up, Marissa. And with all that you have done in your, I'm going to call it a long career here in Nashville, with service to our community is pretty incredible. And I think there's probably people on this call who don't even realize what all that you have played a role in. And it is so important for us to recognize that. And so I want to come back and quickly talk about TTPC real quickly, but I know that Ray has to jump. And so I want to get his insight, and then I'll come back to you, Marissa.
Yeah, I think for me, I think back 15, 20 years ago, I was in middle school and high school. There was a lot of talk about, we had an anti-bias week, and we talked a little bit about lesbians. We talked a little bit about gay people, but that was about as far as it went. And that was like kind of the exposure that I had. And I really didn't get it a lot of other places. Definitely wasn't going to get it in church. And so I still think, like, if you're in the protective kind of Nashville bubble, things are they're better. I currently live in Sumner County, and it's a bit different out there. And that, you don't think of it as being that far away from Nashville, but it can feel completely worlds away. Like when you cross the county line and go to Sumner County, because it is completely different. Like Amy said, like you can't be out with, like, I'm in an interracial marriage, and so it's like that is something. And then we're both I'm trans identifying, and so like you can't be your full self even sometimes in your own community. Like I drive down the road and I see 4 Trump flags. I'm not about to put a pride flag in my yard, being one Black person in this area. So there's still a long way just in the ways to go from here. And so I think that we have to, like, Nashville's great, but what about all the other people that are living outside of the Nashville area? Because we're the ones that come down to Pride for because that's where we can see like there's not any type of pride celebration anywhere in Sumner County that I'm aware of at this point, you know? And so it's like we have to start thinking about the other areas. And like Marissa said, like healthcare is like a huge thing that as a trans person is really hard to find. Like even now it's like, yes, we have some surgeons that do top surgery for trans masculine people, but the company that I worked for at the time, I could not use them as a provider because I worked for basically their competitor. I used to work for HCA Healthcare, one of the largest for-profit healthcare companies in the world. And the only reason that HCA started covering surgery was because of the Affordable Care Act. And that was in 2017. So I transitioned in 2016. So when I first transitioned, I really didn't have any coverage. And that is crazy to think that in 2017, this large Fortune 50 company did not have any protections for or any healthcare benefits for its transgender employees. And I'm like, and the only reason we got them was because of the Affordable Care Act, because we needed to comply so that we could get that Medicare money. And so I think that there's still these pockets that we have to like continue to bust down these walls in, because I think so many people think that they can just continue to get away with it because no one's screaming about it. And so we have to just keep pushing that envelope, because otherwise they're going to think that we're happy with what we have and we're not. And so I think we just have to continue to raise our voices.
I think you're so right.
I think that is, go ahead, Amy. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, Ray. I was just saying, I think that you are so right. And it's, you know, if someone continues to hurt you and you don't tell them that it hurts, they'll say you enjoyed it. And I know that's a paraphrase of a very popular quote, but even when we're being loud, even when we're raising our voice, even when we're going to the Capitol, even when we're doing all the things we're supposed to do, there's still pushback. And I say often that my identity is not political, but it's been so politicized that you almost have to understand coming into conversations that you're going to have to fight every single day for something. It is insane to me that in Texas, where we just lost 19 children and 2 teachers, it's fine. No one's talking about that, but they're trying to ban drag queens. Like, priorities. We are apparently our public enemy number one, but being murdered in school, in the grocery store, walking down the street, that's fine. And that's one of the reasons why I have to be loud, why I have to keep talking, even if it doesn't feel like anyone's listening, because at least if someone sees me talking, maybe that's a reason for them to talk too. You know, can we monetize benefits? Like, can we tell corporations, if you do this, you'll make more money? HCA did it for Medicare money. Cool. Is that what it takes? You need money to do this thing? Well, I know lots of people with money. How much do you need for my life to matter? How much do you need for me to have value being who I am? So maybe maybe we need to talk and be like, okay, so this is our list of people. This is how much money they need. Let's go fundraise, because apparently money talks. Lives don't matter unless you have cash to back it up. I'm sorry, I got a little riled up.
Well, I think Amy just gave us a word today. Let me tell you. Oof. That is, thank you. I want to bring in a sort of a back and forth conversation here. And I want to bring in Dr. Robin and Marissa. Dr. Robin, you have done quite a bit of travel around the United States and around the world in your work, specifically with the Activist Theology Project, but then also with your just talking about your identity and your lived experiences. Marissa, you have done so much work here in the state of Tennessee with TTPC, and I think that there's an interesting blend of the two, right? In some way, because there's things that have happened in the state of Tennessee that we have learned from, and there are things that are happening in other parts of the country that we can find, there's opportunities for us to learn from as well. right? So I would love to hear a little bit from Marissa about what TTPC was, some of the impact that you made, and where the future needs to go with that work. And then Dr. Robin, I'd love you to tie up and talk about what you've seen throughout the United States in your work, and what challenges lie ahead for the community specifically, but then how what is the most important thing that people need to know about the LGBTQ plus community, specifically queer and trans people of color?
Okay, well, for starters, TTPC was the Tennessee Transgender Political Coalition. We formed it in 2003 in the aftermath of a proposed non-discrimination ordinance here in Nashville. Those of you who were here in 2003 will remember when Fred Phelps came and had these ugly protest signs out in front of the courthouse. But that ordinance left out transgender people, and we were angry and we were insulted. We thought people who were our friends, well, we realized they really weren't. They weren't willing to fight for us, and they just said, "This is not your fight." They didn't want us there. They didn't want us in the language. And so a bunch of us were really pissed off, and we got together and said we need to form our own political organization. And we agreed that it had to be statewide. It couldn't just be Nashville only, because this battle was not unique to one city. And so we got together people from across the state to form the group, not just to lobby in the state of Tennessee, but also to lobby at the federal level. Because at that time, we weren't in any of the federal bills either, both the hate crimes law, or hate crimes bill at that time, and even the Employment Non-Discrimination Act also left out transgender people. So we needed to be part of a coordinated national effort. And there were national transgender groups as well fighting for political rights that we needed to work with one another. And so I regularly went to Washington, meeting with everyone in our congressional delegation. Some were more friendly than others. I started going up to the state capitol here in Nashville, was pushing a lot of buttons and challenging a lot of people's stereotypes. We also worked with private employers, including FedEx and Vanderbilt, the two largest private employers in the state, to get non-discrimination policies there. Certainly, we were trying to raise visibility, participating in prides across the state and lobby days, both here in Nashville and in Washington, D.C. And we did everything we could. I stepped aside as president in 2013 because I became, at that time, president of the Davidson County Democratic Women, and I didn't think it was appropriate to be president of a partisan political group and a nonpartisan political group at the same time. So I sort of passed the torch on to others, and most of my work since 2013 has been within the Democratic Party. To raise visibility within the party, to educate Democrats, because there's still some old-fashioned Dixiecrats out there that still need to be educated. And so right now, in fact, I'm now the new president of the Tennessee Federation of Democratic Women. So I head up the statewide Democratic Women's Group. And it's interesting that Kentucky also has a trans woman as their president of the Democratic Women. So both states are the only two states with trans women leading them are Tennessee and Kentucky, neighboring states. And we're trying to make progress and in those sorts of ways. But certainly the legislative work, especially in Tennessee, is much needed and needs to continue.
Thank you, Marissa. Dr. Robin?
Yeah, thank you, Marissa. That's great history to know about here. I think the thing that I see as I have traveled throughout the country and really the world advocating for the margins of the margins to flourish is that there's lots of disconnect about what the needs are, and there's lots of kind of disbelief that the margins of the margins want to be recognized or visible. And, you know, a lot of my work in advocacy and working with higher education and churches and community groups is to talk about the fundamental need to belong and the fundamental need to be connected in community. And I find that, you know, this is kind of a historical problem throughout the country, that we have deeply marginalized communities who don't have social capital in the form of money to organize, and they face lots of barriers that are rooted in capitalism, namely corporations keeping them out of community. And so, you know, I'm a big believer that differences will bring us together. But we've got to be able to bridge with the center of our own difference in order to make those relationships possible. And what I often find is that the dominant culture, whatever that is, white, cishet, able-bodied, Christian, etc., Republican, there isn't the capacity or the competency to actually bridge with difference. And so a lot of the work that I'm trying to do is try to create those capacities so that we can be in relationship. And, you know, it takes a diversity of tactics to do this. Coalition is not a home, as Sweet Honey in the Rock, you know, have said. And also, how do we create ethical futures, right? I mean, I'm deeply invested in another possible world, and that has to mean creating conditions for ethical futures for all of us. And this is a marathon. You know, I've been at this work for 2 decades, and, you know, saw it in the academy that there's no place for difference. I see it in the church all the time. There's no place for difference. And I see it in community that there's no place for difference. And that's really hard to recognize and acknowledge. And my awareness of this is that, you know, when we begin to change ourselves, we change the world. And so how do we continue to steward that kind of work to invite difference into our life so that we can have the kinds of relationships that buoy our flourishing, those of us who are on the margins of the margins. And you know, that work is not for all of us, right? Because I know, I see it with my own eyes that in particular, Black women are the emotional mammies for everyone. And, you know, we have got to change that dynamic in very tangible material ways, because that burden is historic and is really crushing Black women, Black trans women, Black cis women, etc. We've got to figure out a different way to be in relationship and not demand the emotional dependency of women of color. And so, you know, I'm here to imagine with y'all how to do that. I want to steward relationships that really reach toward the far edges of empire, to you know, where is life at the end, at the edge of empire? I mean, I say now, you know, like, we are surviving the end of empire. How do we do that together? And you know, I think it's going to take collective voices. It's going to take a multiplicity of tactics, and really it's going to take relationships. But a lot of us don't know how to be in relationship. That's what I've seen in my work. So I'm just glad to be here to think out loud and to imagine ethical futures together. I believe in a deep politics of in conjunto, and really looking forward to more conversation.
Dr. Robin, I think the hardest part of this evolution is going to be, we're literally taught not to be in a relationship.
Right.
taught not to share. We're taught that binaries are it, like it's this or that, good or bad, whatever, without space for any of the gray in between, or in
Right.
our case, the rainbow in between.
Right.
And moving beyond that, my fear is that we can't do it alone, and that we don't have enough allies who are going to be active and vocal and work beside us, because there's this zero sum bias that if someone else is winning, there's nothing left for me. That if I give space and voice and I honor Black women, there's no space for white women.
Mhm.
If I let someone else be successful in this moment, that means I can't be successful. And I don't know how we change that, like as a society. I don't know how we change that within our own small groups. I grew up hearing that, with Black people, it's always crabs in a barrel. And I never saw that for myself, because everyone around me wanted to see me win.
Right.
I came into the gay community. That's when I started seeing the infighting and the catting. Like I was a female, a diva, a cisgender woman who does drag, and drag queens hated me for a very long time, and I couldn't figure out why. Like all I wanted to do was be them. But then I understood that I was taking up space that they didn't have a space to be. So how do we have those conversations with each other? Like if we can't have them internally, how can we expect to have them externally? It's so much.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for that, because I think we all need to recognize and remember that we're all swimming in the same water, and therefore complicit, right? Our society is framed by the logic of white supremacy, and we are all swimming in that water. And from that, the logic of whiteness is all about competitive relationality. Look at it in schools, in sports, in corporations. And my academic partner is a Black queer ethicist, Dr. Nikki Young, and there is no competition with us. And I try to model non-competitive relating in every relationship, because everywhere around me is hyper competition. And it's in the LGBTQ community too, hyper competition, just like you said, Amy. And we've got to figure out a different kind of relationality to embody. And if we continue to embody competitive relationalities, we won't get anywhere. And a lot, there is this huge scarcity mindset in each of our communities. I mean, just like you said, it's crabs in a barrel. Well, my family told me education was my way out. So I just sort of, but then, we're taught that education is a great equalizer, which is not true, right? So our imaginations have been policed out of us. And I think we've got to start there and start imagining the kind of world we want, and then intentionally make it so. And that's going to take all of us coming to the table and practicing things like honesty, transparency, and vulnerability, so that we can just have intimacy with one another and trust and care. And those foundations can help steward an ethical future. But I think until we all kind of decide that we want a different orientation to relationships, I think we'll still be stuck in this same cycle of the infighting and whatnot. And there's some people who are not going to choose to be in relationship. There are some people who are not going to choose to be in community. They want to fight. They want to be competitive, and their ego is too hooked into the trauma of it all, or they're too addicted to the drama of competition.
My favorite quote or phrase, and I tell it to people all the time, is, baby, that's not a personality, that's a trauma response.
Right.
Because they thrive off of the competitiveness even within the community. Because if I'm not fighting you, what am I here for? What do I have to work with? And I think that happens everywhere. And I think especially damaging within our communities. Because we could be so much more powerful together.
Right, exactly. Exactly. So, the work that I do with churches, communities, and in higher education is to try to steward a different kind of relationship in the world and to try to model non-competitiveness and togetherness. Like we just don't know how to be together in community. And what are we going to do? Like, especially here in Nashville or the Metro Nashville area where housing prices are untenable for almost everyone. We really need to start having a robust conversation in community to figure out how to survive the end of empire. This matters for all of us. What about our aging population who are LGBTQ? I mean, what are we going to do?
It's interesting. MPT is working on a story about aging in the LGBTQA community. And that's one of the things that keeps coming up in the conversation is, where do we go? If we don't have family, if we don't have children, if we don't have this external community to take care of us when we can no longer take care of ourselves.
Exactly.
What happens? Especially in Nashville, like starting, what is it, July 1st, you can't be homeless. It's illegal to be homeless.
Right.
So what happens if you are pushed out of the community you've lived in because, oh, I don't know, gentrification. The work I do with National Launchpad is so important to me, because these are our youth who have either are dealing with mental health and don't have access to care, which furthers their issue within having established and secure housing. They have parents who are not supportive. They don't have community. So how do we come together to be that community? 20 years ago, everyone was part of a drag family, or
Right.
you had a house and
Right.
your house took care of you.
Right.
What happened to that within our community? Do we start letting others in so they can be part of that house? Like, what if we can't do it by ourselves? Why are we not giving space for others to help us?
Exactly.
We can't continue the way we are. We'll be extinct.
Yes. I'm with you. I mean, the system is working by design, and until we fully recognize that, and have an awareness that the thing is working to dispose of all of us who are different.
Oh, you have to call a thing a thing, and
Yeah.
the system hasn't failed. It's like you said, it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do.
Exactly. So I'm ready. I'm down. Let's create that. Let's create the space to imagine. And then let's steward that possibility.
Dr. Robin, Amy, I could just sit and listen to you two talk all day long. I'm sitting here in the lobby of my doctor's office because my morning has been an utter mess, and I'm just completely stunned at how beautiful the conversation has been between all of you today, and it's been so powerful and so meaningful, and I'm so thankful. I want to, we are kind of running close on the end of time, and I want to be respectful of time. We are moving into our next session of 11 o'clock, which is in a short bit. But I do want to quickly end with one quick question for each of you. Is what is the, if you could say one thing that in the next 6 to 12 months, Nashville and Middle Tennessee needs to focus on for the LGBTQ plus community, what would that be?
I'm going to jump in and go first because I have to jump to another meeting.
Sure.
But if Nashville could focus on one thing for the next 6 to 12 months, it's creating a physical safe space with opportunities for mental health, with opportunities for education assistance, with opportunities for housing assistance, just a physical safe space. Like, I don't like that idea of a community center, but a community hub. Call it the umbrella, call it whatever you want to, but a space where people who are in the community can come from resources. Allies to the community can come and be a resource.
I would just jump in and say we need time to imagine together and really spend time imagining. I think we are so fixated on goals and outcomes that we don't actually invest in a process of imagination. So I'd love to see Nashville create some space and time for imagining the kind of world we want.
Well, certainly Nashville is undergoing a housing crisis that's affecting so many parts of the community, and especially ours. I know Metro is working on something. I don't know, but we've had issues with housing. When COVID hit, a lot of people lost their jobs. A lot of people were kicked out of apartments. And there was an emergency shelter established at the fairgrounds. And at the time, I was the chair of the Human Relations Commission, and I got complaints from trans people that they were being discriminated against and not allowed to use the proper facilities. And so I'm in, and I think the people who had been abusing trans people for years, for the first time, found themselves having to answer to a trans person. And they were caught flabbergasted and flat-footed, and they were denying that they were doing anything wrong, which of course was bullshit. But we need to, whether it's an emergency or not, and it's becoming a crisis because of the rising, this dramatically rising cost of housing, and which has become a huge issue. And you know, and we just keep pushing homeless people of all categories aside. We don't want to see them. We don't want to think about them, and we have to really address this issue as a city.
I think all very salient points. Thank you, Dr. Robin. Thank you, Marissa. I know Amy had to jump and she left her contact information in the chat. Ray did as well a little bit earlier. We will be back here in approximately, actually exactly 26 minutes for our next conversation, where we will talk about how we create a better future for all LGBTQ plus people in the South. And so I look forward to that conversation. There will be opportunity for breakouts and talking amongst ourselves. And so I'm really excited about that conversation. So you can stay logged in here. I think we're continuing to run, if that's correct, Dawn. And we'll jump back in here shortly. I'll see you all in 26 minutes with my face.
Thank you.
Thank
Yes,
you all so
we are
much.
running. Thank you.
Okay.
We will pause recording at this time and see you at 11.
Thank you. So glad to be here with all of you. And I'm truly glad to be in a stationary location for those of you who joined us in the first session and knew that things were a little strange to start the morning off. So with that said, we have 3 panelists who are going to be with us today, and I want to talk a little bit about the lived experiences of LGBT people, but in a new light. So today's topic is pretty clear and going to be a fascinating one, because we're going to break out into some group conversations, and we're going to talk about the experiences that each of your organizations also play in working to create a better future for LGBTQ people throughout the South. We're going to start obviously with the state of Tennessee, and Middle Tennessee, and we will take it from there. We're going to start off, though, by doing a quick round of introductions. And I'm going to start with Meredith Fortney.
Hi, everyone. My name is Meredith Fortney. My pronouns are she, her, and I have been involved in the Nashville community, LGBTQ community for many years. I've served on the board for Human Rights Campaign for about 6 years, volunteered with them for about 8 to 9, and I'm happy to serve on the board for NTN right now.
Thank you, Meredith. And Delray Zimmerman.
Thanks so much, Phil, and good morning, everyone. I'm Delray Zimmerman. I'm the director at the Office for Diversity Affairs and the Vanderbilt Program for LGBTQ Health at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. Have lived in Nashville for 25 years and longtime volunteer in the LGBTQ community, providing service at Nashville Cares. Was on the board of the former Out Central for a number of years, chaired it for 2. Also, I spent 6 years on the board of Glisson, Tennessee, and now very excited to be part of Inclusion Tennessee moving forward. So thanks for the opportunity to be with you all this morning.
All right, thank you, Delray. So what we're going to do today is have a conversation around a book that is actually really meaningful to the work that I've been involved in here in Middle Tennessee for some time. The book will be shared with all of you as a follow-up, but it is a book titled "The New Queer Conscience," and it is by Adam Ely. And if you don't follow Adam on social media, I would strongly encourage you to, if you do care about LGBT causes and LGBT issues. Adam is a powerful thought leader, a powerful speaker, and a leader in a multitude of different avenues that have really created change, not only in New York and around the United States where he is really active, but it's also he's also active around the world. And I just saw that we had our third panelist join us, Joseph Whitson.
Hi.
Do you want to give a quick brief introduction?
Sure. Yeah. First of all, sorry I'm late, and sorry I'm in a hat. I had COVID, I found out this morning. It finally came and got me, but I'm here. So that's not anything that you really need to know about me, except for that if I say anything crazy, just know that it is not the COVID, that is who I am. I've worked in politics and government for, I'd say since 2007, so that's going on 15 years now. I've worked for the state comptroller's office, navigating a really interesting land there as an LGBT person, which was interesting, working with the state legislature on a number of policy issues. Then I went over and worked with Megan Barry's office as her director of legislation, and then also assumed the role of LGBT liaison to the community when David Briley took over and created that position. I maintained my position there as his director of legislation. So I've been involved in state and local politics here for a very long time, and also served as president of Nashville Pride, and have served on a number of LGBT boards and commissions. And so I'm grateful to be here, and thanks, Phil, for having me.
Thank you so much, Joseph. Glad to have you as part of this conversation today. So I was asked in the chat, the name of the book is The New Queer Conscience, and it's by Adam Ely. And so a link to that book can be found. Now, we'll put a link to the book here in the chat here in a little bit, and we'll make sure that gets shared. It's an easy buy. It's $9 on Amazon. and well worth the $9 to spend on it, because for a 54-page read, it gives you a really good challenge to really where we can make change for our community and for the future. And so today's conversation is going to be one that we're going to break out into some groups. We're going to talk about what we do in our organizations to create change for LGBT people. But then we're also going to talk about sort of these guiding principles, these new 9 principles of the new queer conscience. And so we'll start there. And what I'm going to ask my panelists to do is kind of chime in as we're talking through these first 5 directions of the new queer conscience. The first is that we approach all queer people, all LGBTQIA+ people, with the principles of identification and kindness. So I want to talk a little bit about identification, right? And I'm actually going to pick on Delray for a second and have him talk a little bit about identification and what that means for his work in healthcare, but then also what it means for sort of engaging the full community. And then we're going to go down the list and we'll talk to each of our panelists about what it means to them.
Sure. Thank you, Phil. I think it is imperative for all members of the LGBTQ community to be seen as uniquely who we are. And I certainly encounter that firsthand every single day. It's always amazing to me that when I'm talking to a patient on the phone, especially someone who's calling regarding gender affirming care, that I certainly want to be able to address them for who they are. And so when I ask them their name, often they're asking, do you mean my legal name? And I'm like, well, no, I want to know your chosen name. I want to know who you are. And it's always interesting to me, the reaction, because I don't think that a lot of people are asking that, particularly as people are seeking healthcare resources. I'm also mindful we have lots of swag that we give away in the medical center, and we do that purposefully in relation to just creating more of a welcome space. And I'll hold this up. This is one of our pronoun buttons. You can see that has they, them on them, and we have 6 different styles here in the medical center. And I have heard 2 stories recently where, as our staff members are wearing pronoun buttons to signal who they are, how welcoming that is to patients. And I heard a medical center, a medical student say to me recently, she was rounding with some physicians, and because she was wearing a pronoun button, a patient actually came out to her during an encounter, and it was especially meaningful to her. So and I think about this too from a just a foundational health perspective. I see a lot of data on health disparities that affect the LGBTQ community, and I think that germane to that is taking a look at mental health concerns. LGBTQ people are more susceptible to a variety of mental health concerns related to anxiety and depression and suicidality, lots of different issues. And I always tell people when I'm doing clinical trainings, that is not because there's anything endemically wrong with LGBTQ people. I think we're perfect in who we are and how we show up in the world. But but we couch that discussion under consideration of minority stress theory, which posits that because I'm a minority person, that I walk around with additional stress and fear around how I'm going to be encountered. And we know that longitudinal bias and discrimination really plays into mental health, and that's exactly why we see the upticks in different health conditions. And again, it's because of a lack of identification, not being recognized for who we are in our families, in our faith communities, and in schools. No matter where we show up, it's problematic across the board. And then, of course, as you alluded to, kindness, which I think I'll relegate that discussion when we get more broadly there. But there's a direct link. There's a direct link to mental health concerns and people not being recognized, not being recognized for who we are.
Thank you, Delray. I think it's interesting, the way that Adam Eli starts this section of the book is that he says the golden rule, treat others how you want to be treated, is simply not good enough. People who have spent years, possibly their whole lives, being treated less than or unequal often lack self-worth. I've met a lot of queer people who simply just don't know how special they are and how wonderfully they should be treated. Mm-hmm. And honestly, hearing just me reading those words and seeing them again kind of sends chills down my back. And it's one of those experiences, like it's one of those things that, as someone who has been othered, as someone who's in many cases and many times of my life felt like I don't belong, that we have to work together to create places of belonging. Mm-hmm. And it's simple things like looking at someone in the eye and saying, you are loved, or even simpler, and just using the right pronouns when someone wants to be addressed that way. Meredith, let's talk a little bit about talk about kindness a little bit, and from your experience and your work, how kindness plays a role in connecting with people and creating change.
Absolutely. Thank you. I think kindness is the pathway to trust. And I think that's something that our community needs more than ever, from not only each other, but from our allies, from just other external forces around the communities. And I feel like it all starts with kindness. I think, in our spaces, when we have overlapping organizations and businesses that are trying to all kind of do the same thing and meet their own goals and get people connected, and we kind of sometimes forget that we're on the same team. We're trying to accomplish the same goals. And sometimes the competition can create spaces that aren't very kind and make you feel like you're siloed. And I think that Nashville has really tried over the years to come together and focus the work outward, and showing the external community outside of the LGBTQ space that we are a place of safety, security, kindness, and we're willing to work, and we come to the table to work, not to we're fighting, but we're doing it like the kill them with kindness. We're doing it in the best way to show them that this is how we lead. This is how our community comes together. And it's really, I feel like that's the way, yes, you build trust, but also, the longevity of the work you're doing, if it's based in kindness, and the connections are there, and it's not selfish, it's open and honest. And, it's more for us now to create those connections, to be seen as, the kind community, but it also is going to translate, to future generations who are going to come after us to do this work.
Yeah, you're right. Now, I think what's interesting is that every person has a different story, right? Mm-hmm. And some of our experiences overlap. But the reality is that in order to be your friend, I don't have to, if someone doesn't want to be my friend, I still should find ways to try to be kind and helpful, because that is the way that breaks down barriers. And it also reminds us that we also, can be the light that sometimes is the light in the darkness that's so often thrown to our community. We can be that prism, that rainbow that often it can be diminished in communities that don't necessarily appreciate and support us. Joseph, I want to talk to you about a little bit more about the newest members of our community, people who have just come out, people who have come to Nashville to experience their life as a queer or as a queer person, as an LGBTQ plus person. We've heard stories time and time again of these people throughout our region who are escaping just 20 minutes, 30 minutes up the road, 90 minutes away, where there's not healthcare support. There's not social support. How has Nashville been able to sort of be, in some ways, or a beacon of change? I think you have a unique perspective on it from a governmental side of things, knowing that we still have so much work to do to get there. But what are some of the things that we've done over the last couple of years as a city to ensure that the newest members of our community, the newest members of our LGBT community, the ones that have just come out, can experience radical empathy?
Well, I mean, that's a hard question, honestly, and I'm struggling to answer it.
Right.
I'm running through my mind. When I was at the mayor's office, we looked, and so for transparency, I'm not there. I've not been in Metro government for 3 years now. I'm a consultant and lobbyist, so I work with Metro government, but I don't represent them in any capacity, for full transparency. When I was there in David Briley's administration, it became evident that we were on the HRC equality index. I think that we had like a D, right? So like 60 out of 100 or something like that. A lot of that had to do with the fact that I think nobody had actually just tried to fill out the application. I mean, and it's interesting because you think of Nashville as something, this is why I'm kind of struggling to answer this question. When I went into Metro government, I expected, particularly having gone from the state, that it would be, just this liberal bastion of tons of progressive people who were going to use pronouns and stuff like that. And it's not. I found that a lot of those agencies were full of folks from, the surrounding counties. And, I had a good time. I enjoyed working there, but there was certainly discrimination. So I'll tell you that also one of the things that was, I don't know if you'll recall this, but there was a situation where a trans person had been shamed and, by I think 2 fire officials and then a few police officers online. And the direct immediate result, well, I mean, it took a year, honestly, for that to even come to the attention of the officials who were even able to deal with it. That sounds like a nightmare, and it was. But once it did come to light and people in the media started to figure out about it, it came to the mayor's office. And while that was a really horrible situation and a horrible thing, it caused some good to happen. And one of the things that came from that was the safe space initiative that the city does. You've seen, I think, probably some of those little stickers that say this is a safe space. You can come in here if you're being attacked, or you can come in here and feel safe, and we respect who you are and your identity, right? I mean, that's one thing, but again, that came out of a bad situation. But sometimes those things are necessary for us to recognize the wrong to provide some good. We do have Brandon Marshall is the LGBT liaison in the mayor's office. Brandon is wonderful. He is there to help with any LGBTQIA issues plus in the community, and you know, help people navigate government in the LGBT community, et cetera. But again, it comes back to, you know, what is that? And this is where we have a lot of work to do as a community with the government. I mean, you know, Metro Nashville doesn't even provide full inclusive benefits for trans people. They voted on it in December and it failed. And so, you know, there is a lot of work to do. And I remember when we sat there with that HRC score and, you know, I remember a few folks around the table, not maliciously, just I think trying to be achievers, were saying, you know, what can we do to get more points? What can we do to get more points? And at one point I said, you know, it's good for us to have points for what we do. But if we don't do these things, or if we need to have a D, then we need to have a D on our report card, right? So that it's obvious that we need to help and to improve. And so I'd say that in answer to your question, we have a lot of work to do for people who are newly coming out. I don't even want to go into this is what we do right, because I'm not sure that we're doing it right. But I do think that what's important is having those difficult conversations, regardless of the rooms that you're in, right? It's nice for all of us to have this conversation about inclusivity and asking people what their pronouns are, and starting in meetings by saying your pronouns, right? But you got to also do that out there in the community where you know that people aren't used to that, where they're gonna, you know, have questions about it, and call people on their stuff, you know, I mean, and have those difficult conversations. And I think that that's how we can start to provide a more inclusive safe net for people to come out in, right? Is to improve ourselves.
You're exactly right, Joseph. Thank you. I think that, you know, newly out people are the future of the movement, right? And they're also the future of peoplehood, and they're the future of our culture. What they do and how they feel today, and about being a member of the LGBTQ plus community and how they are involved in the community, directly impacts the trajectory of our community. And aside from being kind, and aside from being welcoming, it's in the best interest of everybody to ensure that these members feel loved, feel appreciated, and that there's a sense of belonging for their bright queer futures. So on that note, I want to pause as we move into our next point. And I just want to quickly acknowledge that Mac Huffington is in the audience with us today. Mac is the president of Nashville Pride, and is with us today. And then also one of our board members from Inclusion Tennessee, Jordan Constantine, is also with us in the room. So thank you both for being here. I really appreciate you showing up. And we'll be looking forward for both of you to join in conversation at some point throughout our talk today. So point 3 is really to allow people to come out in their own terms, on their own terms, right? And that's one of the most important pieces, I think, of anybody's LGBTQ plus lived experience, right? It's if you see someone who you believe is closeted, it's the obligation of us as LGBTQ plus identified people, but then also the obligation of people who serve those in this community to make them feel the most comfortable, right? Delray talked about that a little bit before with the patient that saw the doctor, or saw the nurse practitioner and the doctor that had the pronoun pin. It's simple things like that that ensure a sense of welcoming and a sense of belonging. And I think the most important thing to realize is that the best time to come out is the exact moment that that person feels the most ready. And it's not anybody else's responsibility, anybody else's role to push that on another person. And so not questioning another person's sexuality, what we need to put our time and effort into, though, is creating community that is warm and welcoming. And so what I want to talk about next, and this is kind of a one point question for all of the panelists, is what are some of the things that we can do to create community that is warm and welcoming here in Middle Tennessee? Also, ideas that can be taken and used throughout the South. And I'll let whoever wants to take this and go.
Phil, it's something that's just really on my heart right now, and I kind of want to bridge the discussion between kindness and this new topic. But you know, as folks are coming out and thinking about kindness, what I'd like to say is that I believe kindness starts at home, and it is incumbent upon us to really be kind to ourselves. I'm turning 50 years old this year, and it is coming more and more into focus as I get older, that the most important thing that I can do is love myself and treat myself very well and believe in myself, because when I do those things, then I can absolutely be of service to those around me to create a welcoming environment and to bring other people along. For 14 years now, RuPaul has greeted us every week saying, how in the hell are you going to love anybody else if you don't love yourself? You know, and that's become a real catchphrase in our community, but it is so true. It is so true. You know, here at Vanderbilt, we foster the only LGBTQ health internship in the country. I'm really, really proud of that. And so I've got 4 young people that I'm working with, and they just joined us this past week. And it's interesting. I mean, they are here to learn about health issues, but I am taking the opportunity to mentor those folks in different ways on a professional level, but also an emotional level as well. I detect that these young people are very, very hard on themselves because people have been hard on them. And, and so the things that I'm saying here, how important it is to love myself, how important it is to believe in myself. You know, I mean, just within the last week, I keep echoing those messages to these young people. And I think that, that as much as we can, that is critical. That is critical. And I think that as elders, I now consider myself an elder. I'm getting my AARP card this year. Yay. That it's incumbent upon all of us to rally around and embrace these young people, whether we're part of an organization or not. Just as people, we need to be lifting up folks who are newly out. I'm also mindful, as you say, people come out in their own way and in their own time. I talked to a patient yesterday who's newly retired and is just now beginning the transition process. So as we think about young people, you know, I mean, there are folks older than me who are just now reconciling and getting into alignment with who they are and are believing in themselves to, you know, enough to say, I'm worth this change in my life to be authentic.
Del Rey coming in with the word today. Thank you. I don't want to put Joseph or Meredith on the spot, but if you want to add anything, Mac, I saw you snapping your hand around. So if you want to add something to that too, I would love to hear from you. Or yeah, but if there's anything you want to add to that.
I was just gonna say, I mean, totally, you know, what Del Rey is saying, and it's so important. Like, I was at the LGBT prom, and to see those young people feel so comfortable coming to the prom, holding girlfriend's hand, boyfriend and boyfriend holding hands, or even, like I said, some in the middle of coming out, you know, they still deciding what to do, but feeling comfortable, welcomed, loved. And that was part of, you know, what we talked to them all night. You're welcome here. This is a safe place. You know, we talked about resources. We talked about things they could do, people they could talk to. And just again, throughout the night, you're loved. And when you're ready to do whatever that is, you know, that there are people out there, you know, for you. And it's just so different now from, of course, when I first discovered I was gay, you know, because none of this was around. I mean, I was, you know, petrified. I literally didn't even come out. I'm not even gonna say come out, just had a girlfriend and that was college. And that's because I had packed up and moved away. So this for young people is just, it's amazing. And I think, yes, we need to continue as a group, as a community, gay, the allies, everyone, to continue to bring our young people up and uplift and feel safe.
Yeah, and you're, Matt, for the record, very, very good at that, making people feel welcome and greeting them and bringing them in and making them feel safe. I want to commend you for that. Seriously, I've known you now for a decade, and you're good at that, and thank you. And to that point, I mean, and to add to what Del Rey says, you know, yeah, take care of yourself first. You know, if you can't swim, then the person drowning can't swim. And so you've got to take care of yourself first. But to mesh exactly that with what Mac was saying, I mean, you know, inclusion, inclusivity, diversity even, I mean, those things do not happen on accident. They happen on purpose. They happen because you're strategic about them, and they happen because you know, show that to the world, right? So, and act it, right? You know, so if you see that person sitting alone at the community event, or the new person who, you know, maybe is sitting over there quiet, you know, go say hey to them, you know, bring them along, right? There's a lot of, you know, clickiness in the community, you know, and I think that it is hard to sometimes break through and find your people, you know, especially for young folks trying to come out. And you know, what's interesting, I've had, it's interesting we're on this topic. For some reason, I've had 3 of my friends who are older than me, who have children, in the last month and a half or so, come to me and share with me that they have children who are coming out. One has decided, and I'm not sharing anybody's information here because you don't know any of my people, and there's 3 of them. One has decided, right? These are all kids in high school. One has already said that, you know, I'm pansexual, non-binary. That's how I identify. The other is trans. The other has said, you know, I don't know, and I don't really know that I care to know. I don't know that I want to come out. I am, you know, and so I'll keep talking to you about this, right, Mom? And it's interesting because, you know, these people come to me and they say, what do I do? And I say, well, first of all, I'm not a trans person, so I can't speak to trans community things, but let me connect you with a trans person, one. But the other thing that I say to them is, you know, what helped me when I was a kid, and I didn't expect this, when I did come out to my dad, well, he asked if I was confused about my sexuality in the parking lot of a buddy's barbecue. And I said, no, I'm not, but I like men, boys at the time, I said. I was 18. But, you know, what was so helpful, one of the many things that he said to me in that conversation, it went well, very lucky and privileged, but he said, you know, we know, your mother and I, we know gay people who are adults and who are happy. And so that possibility for you in the future is real. And so just let me know how we can help you to get there. You know, and so for me, it was just so helpful. I mean, now that was in 2002, right? So it was a totally different world, but to just know that there were people, right? Whether they be for whomever and however you're coming out, right? Just to know that there are happy trans people, that is normal, that for whatever normal means, but that you are part of the community. So
and just real quick, something I think Phil, you said, for all of us to, because we've had our experiences, to also keep our eye out. There was a young lady at the Franklin Pride Festival this weekend, and like I said, we just won't call any names, but one of our board members was able to detect and talk to one young lady, and she literally said she was petrified. And so she spent the time to talk to her, even offered a hug, said that she would walk around the festival with her. So us also keeping the eye out for young folk and trying to, again, make them feel welcome. We had a young lady at the prom, exactly what Joe said. She was sitting in the corner. One of the drag queens grabbed her up and danced with her, and again, told her she was loved and welcome. And she kind of, the rest of the night, was able to, enjoy herself. But so I think all of us, need to keep a sharp eye out to, for our young folks.
And truthfully, Mag, it's not just our young folks, right? It's also it's ages across the spectrum, because we have older adults who are coming out late in life, who are who will come to their first Pride in 2 weeks, and they will be petrified, and they will have no idea what they are experiencing, right? But it is incumbent upon all of us to ensure that they feel welcome and ensure that they have a sense of belonging and a place to be, right? Meredith, you were going to say something?
Yeah. So Mac, you bring up a great point too. So I think there are two different type of audiences we're looking at too in Nashville, because Nashville is becoming much more of a transient city, and we have more people moving here. So when people move here, I feel like as somebody who moved here as an adult, I got away from, the fear of coming out in my hometown. But we have so many kids, and I'm speaking from my wife's experience too, because she moved here when she was 4 and grew up in Franklin. And when Franklin had their first Pride, she was like, I thought I would be long dead before Franklin, Tennessee ever had a Pride, because I was a scared queer kid and it was like the worst thing in the world. And so looking at our communities in two different lenses of the ones that are moving here and are already out or, coming out in the process, and because they're in a new city that is, open and accepting and has space for them. And also looking at our communities that, are here locally, and the kids that are growing up and maybe haven't had the opportunities to be out because they might run into somebody they know or see somebody that their parents know. And it's a little bit more of a hesitation there. How do we bring the openness and safety and security to those people as well, and offer them an outlet to be, be themselves in a community where they know a lot more people than people that are moving in. Just something that I was thinking as Mac was talking.
It's really thoughtful. I remember having conversations with Alex, your wife, about Franklin Pride, and trying to push the idea that it's actually a really good thing that Franklin is having a Pride, and it has been. I went this past weekend. It's been a long week. Yes, I went this past weekend, and it was wonderful. I mean, it was just incredible to see so many people out celebrating their Pride in the heart of Williamson County, and it was pretty incredible. Delray, you were going to say something.
Yeah. I wanted to piggyback a little bit on something I heard Amy say in the last session around, around how fractured our community can be. Because I think one thing that we can do to support people is to foster greater solidarity among one another, and heal some of the fractures that we have in our community. And I'm really mindful of the level of consciousness we are now, that we are bringing to make sure that folks with disabilities are included, that we're including more inclusive of racial and ethnic minorities, and and are really standing together. And I also think that kind of solidarity also extends in the voting booth as well. Because as we are experiencing such animus, from our state legislature, especially around trans youth, I think that we need to do our due diligence to inspire one another to make sure that we're getting out and that we're electing representatives who will also foster kindness. And the last point I want to mention in that is that one thing that we're seeing is this discussion around trans people playing sports, right? And when I hear conversations around that, it's either let them play or ban it altogether. It's an either or, very binary situation. And I'm like, I really want to elect leadership who is really thoughtful to go, oh, wow, how can, first of all, we're going to include people. Like, the spirit of inclusion is always the right move, regardless, bar none, right? And so how do we effectively include trans people in sports where there are concerns and whatnot? Can we create co-ed leagues? Like, what actually can we do to make it equitable and fair, and and let our kids play, right? And so I think that as we talk about breaking down the binaries within our identity, there's a lot of binary decisions that are being made on behalf of our community that we also have to break down. And I think that starts with a spirit of kindness.
You're absolutely right, Delray. That session, our opening session with Amy and Dr. Robin, those last 30 minutes, I was just sitting in awe, and I was just like, keep talking, because it was just so powerful. And I think the one point that, there's so many points that truly hit, but the one that really I'm remembering right now is Amy's statement around, and I think she actually just put it in the chat, was that the rainbow umbrella actually doesn't cover everybody. And it's a perfect segue actually into the fourth point, which is recognizing the playing field is not equal.
Mm-hmm.
Certain identities, queer or not, come with certain privileges. And people of color, the trans community, gender non-conforming community, disabled people of any combination of these things face challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And truthfully, the lesson is learned the hard way. And so this is going to be one of our first breakouts. And so what I'd like to do is actually do a breakout session right now with everybody that's in our audience. And we're going to talk about this topic specifically. What can we be doing within our organizations, and what can we be doing in our own personal lives today and in the immediate future to work towards creating a more equal playing field for trans and queer and LGBTQIA+ people. And so I think Abby from CNM is here and can do the breakouts. If not, I'm going to tap around on my iPad.
Yep. How many do you want, and
okay.
How many groups?
Okay, let's do an even split if we can.
On it, just give me 1 minute.
Okay. And so in that conversation that we have today, we'll come back, and I'd like one person from each of the groups to kind of share back. We're going to do this for a 10-minute conversation. Our panelists can exit the stage for a brief second if they need to get some water, because this is all about the folks in the conversation today. And so we'll come back in 10 minutes and engage in some one-on-one conversation. So I'm really looking forward to hearing back from each of you. And breakout should be starting any second. Cameras aren't necessary, by the way.
I totally understand what you were saying, Meredith.
Yeah. I knew I was trying to get it all out before the countdown happened and just didn't work, but you guys got what I was saying.
I want to give a quick kudos to Jolene. You nailed that comment. It landed right in time, and thank you so much.
I was really rushing it in there.
Point.
Well, we're back from our conversations and our first breakout. We'll do another one towards the end of this conversation in a little bit. But I'd like to hear back from the groups and some of the insights that you heard from folks in your sessions. So if someone wants to take the lead from maybe breakout group number 1.
I'm not sure what breakup group number mine was.
If you were in the first half of the alphabet, you're group 1.
Okay. I'm not.
That was Del Rey's group, by the way.
By first name, alphabet by first name.
Got it. Yeah.
Oh.
I'm happy to go unless somebody else would like to go. I think that some of the big takeaways actually were perfectly encapsulated by Jolene at the very end in what she said, like in those last 20 seconds, which she said, and correct me, and please add on to it because you were cut off. You said not just listening to people, but actually making change based on the feedback that we get. We talked a lot about not just tokenizing and recruiting people from specific areas of our community so that our organizations look like we want them to, but also empowering those people to be leaders in those positions. And again, taking their feedback and making positive change. We also talked about, we didn't really get to brainstorm about it, but Del Rey brought up a really good point about, at the end of the day, one of the things that separates all of us, regardless of whether you identify as an LGBTQI+, et cetera, is that your socioeconomic status. And so in Nashville, particularly when it's just like, event this is $50 and event that is $75, what opportunities do we have for people of all ages of different socioeconomic backgrounds so that they can feel not just included, but like that they can affect change in our community as well. And those are the things that we talked about, unless anybody else has anything to add.
Thank you, Joseph, for representing us.
Happy to.
All right, and the latter half. I listened in, but I was, I want to hear from somebody else.
Hi, hello. Hi. I haven't been able to talk.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sania Jameson. I'm the executive director of Jefferson Street Sound Museum. And I am loving the conversation just regarding inclusivity and especially when it comes to transgender. We represent one of the first transgender women to come out of North Nashville, Jackie Shane, as a soul music artist. And so all of this is really helpful because I'm curating and developing the first annual Jackie Shane Pride celebration in North Nashville. And we've never had a Pride celebration honoring a transgender woman in North Nashville. And so I need all the help and support in making sure that I do all the right things to create the safest, most joyful space for all of the beautiful humans of the world to honor her music, honor her message of being true to yourself. And it's beautiful. She has a beautiful story that really caters to my own personal story, not being transgendered, but someone who felt like hiding because everyone around me didn't support who I was as an artist. And so I think her story coming out of North Nashville, she was born in 1940. Her mom accepted her all the way through, which is a rare thing at the age of 13, wanting to wear her mom's heels and things like that. But her voice is immaculate. And to know that she came from my community gave me hope as a millennial. And that I too can survive some of the toughest moments in my own community where I don't feel advocated for. And so I know there's a lot of young people in North Nashville, Generation Zers who are of the LGBTQ community that need a safe space to express their truth through art. And I've only been an executive director at Jefferson Street Sound Museum for the past 7 months, but I think this is going to be very monumental celebration to let people know, like, you too can like thrive in your community, although a lot of these changes are happening. And I wanted to be a part of this forum, this workshop, so that I can know other people who are on this train to create peaceful inclusion in organizations where kindness is the brand, no matter who you are and no matter who you love.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Looking forward to that event. That's the day before National Pride, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes, that's the day before Nashville. It's June 24th will be the official kickoff for that event. It's from 3 p.m. to 10 p.m. So, you know, I've been just sitting and just receiving and taking a lot of notes from the conversations. And I'm just really thankful to like meet all of you and learn so much more about how to best navigate the best organization experiences for LGBTQ plus people, and just for people to also learn how to be an ally. I think that's something that we don't have like guidance on sometimes. Like, what does it really mean to be an ally? What is, you know, and how do you know what are the things that you shouldn't do as an ally? You know, like, I know he mentioned that we talked about tokenism and things like that. Like, and I think also we talked about conversations. I think it was Meredith that mentioned the importance of conversations. For me, I would like to foster a story time in our museum where we're actually having conversations with the youth, or like he mentioned some of the foster kids that he worked for that were headed towards foster kids, but having conversations with their families. But one of the things I think that we can miss in organizations is like the actual people being here telling their stories and telling us what they need. So I really want to develop that into the organization, into our organization, and anybody that can help me find pathways to do that and be a source to help form that experience where they can have conversations on site with us. I think that's really beautiful, like a generational conversation, because it's a lot of change for older generations that's happening, and they're just like, whoa, I don't understand this, and that can feel unsafe. So like, how do we make it easier for us to converse and still have kindness, even though there's just some people that just don't understand it yet? So
yep, you're right. Thank you. Appreciate that. Sheila, I'm going to call on you. Could you share a little bit about the breakout conversation? I feel like you were taking notes and also asking questions and providing some feedback from some of your work with YWCA.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for that. Yeah, we talked about kind of getting to the space where we could create that even playing field, that equity. And so for us, the conversation was about first making sure that we identify ourselves as a safe organization, if at all possible, putting that out into the universe and making sure that's known. And then using the right language, you know, putting things out there, such as like the pronoun button, right? That is just such a great story, because that immediately changes what this person feels comfortable talking about, because everyone's talking about it. So we felt like language was also really important. And then from an HR perspective and from a people perspective, continuing the conversation always about where people are, what they need, you know, new projects we're starting, having the right people at the table to talk about what is needed. And in order to do that, making sure that we're plugged in with HR in recruiting the right individuals into those teams, into the organization and onto the board, and just being intentional about making sure that we are, because same groups tend to pull in same groups. So if you have all white men on your board, you're going to get all white men pulling in all white men. So we want to make sure that we are thinking thoroughly about all the folks that we're sending invitations to make sure that that representation happens and the conversation continues. And so we didn't necessarily get to maybe mind-blowing solutions, but just kind of how to walk into the conversation, how to walk into making the organization safe so that you're removing barriers as they come.
I mean, and that's really what where the start is, right? That's the starting line. Is as you continue to move forward, it's the removing the barriers as they come along, right? And how you can address those appropriately. Thank you all for the feedback and for sharing. We're going to jump into our next 5 topics, and we'll have a little breakout session at the end of our conversation, very close to 1 o'clock. So the 5th point in the new queer conscience is that the more privileged members of our society must rally behind the less privileged. Once we recognize our privilege, there's a question that we all have to ask ourselves, right? And that question is, how do we leverage our privilege and our resources to benefit all members of our community and all members of our society? How do we break down systems that have granted us unearned privilege to begin with? Now, historically, the opposite has happened. Marginalized groups have tended to rally behind the more privileged. Stonewall was an example of that. The event, which many say launched the gay liberation movement, was started and primarily fought by queer people of color. Street hustling, effeminate gay youth, trans women, butch lesbians, gender non-conforming folks. But once the fires and the riots ended, it was gay men, gay white men who benefited from male privilege, who took control of the movement. And when the gay male community specifically was mobilized by the AIDS crisis in the 80s, it was huge numbers of women who came up to help. It was women who were not queer, women who were queer. And they played a key role in the success of organizations like ACT UP. And I think that there's story after story of situations like this where privilege has really been at the height of our conversation, right? Of our existence. And so while our community's circumstances may have changed, the urgency for direct action, in my mind, remains the same. And so what I'd like to talk about next is how we pool our resources as a community, how we create opportunities for collective impact, how we work together with all of our organizations to create the change that is so desperately needed, not only for LGBTQIA+ identified folks, but how can we do this that impact people who may not necessarily identify within the title or the rainbow, but then how do we work with people who are who might have 2 of those identities, right? But then also how might we create a program or initiative that works with LGBT folks, but also has an initiative that also benefits people in North Nashville, right? And so let's have a conversation around that. And so that's what I want to talk about next. Let's talk about direct action, and toss it right to Delray to start because I see his mic off.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Phil. Well, and again, I kind of want to lay a foundation, I think, in the interpersonal space. As you were speaking and sort of asking about, our challenges organizationally, I think that the initial challenge starts with each of us, right? The evolution of consciousness is a really beautiful thing. And as I reflect back on my own life, and when I first came out at 19, that I was so concerned with my own safety as a young gay man, that I did not want to associate with more gender nonconforming people as part of my community, because I felt like that put an undue target on my back. Now, I didn't understand that at the time, but like I said, the evolution of consciousness is a beautiful thing. And I do understand that now, especially in the context of unconscious bias. I'm very fortunate enough to teach a 2-hour course in unconscious bias in the medical center. And, in that kind of fear is the root of unconscious bias. We all have it. We absolutely all carry unconscious bias, and it's there for a good reason. It's there to keep us safe. But when we use our unconscious biases to unduly target other people, that's the work, the interpersonal work that I think that we all have to do. And I think that there is a call to consciousness for all of us. And what I would like to just teach every single person in our community is that if you can look at the 5 people who are closest to you, outside your family of origin, and if those folks are in the same socioeconomic status, same race, same level of ability, same educational level, and your closest people have a very homogenous background, you got work to do. You got work to do, because it's really, really important to draw people with different experiences in, so that we can learn from them. And so I certainly want you to be able to pivot to an organizational stance. But I do think that the foundation, again, is incumbent upon us as individuals to reach outside ourselves and to deeply connect with people who have different experiences than we do. My liberation is absolutely tied with every other spirit on this planet, right? And particularly those who are who experience greater marginalization than I do.
Yeah, so true. Meredith, toss to you.
How can I follow Del Rey? I mean, that was great. I couldn't have said it better or agree that, it is, and we were chatting about this as the latter part of our conversation in the first breakout, is that, you are attracted to where you see yourself. And if you only see yourself in these spaces, are you doing yourself a disservice? You go, like, it's just human nature to be attracted to something that feels similar or comfortable, but that's not where growth happens. Growth happens in the uncomfortable and in the spaces where, we don't look the same. We don't have the same privileges, come from the same background, but that's how we learn what each other needs and how, again, we grow. I do think it is, and I don't even want to call it a burden, but I guess it's like our burden to bear as people of privilege in our communities that are able to, spend time today. There are a lot of people in our community that can't take time off work, can't join these conversations in the middle of the day, or aren't able to come and do meetings or be a part of organizations as they want to, based, on time, treasure, talent, whatever, they aren't able to. So the fact that we are, is our opportunity to give back, and to show that, because that is what the people that came before us did for us. You know, we're standing on the shoulders of giants, and we have to continue that process. But we have to do so intentionally. And if we just go into it same old, not having intentional goals or making sure that we are being visible across the board. And Delray brings up a good point. It's something that I am working on where, you know, making sure inclusion around people with different abilities is there too, because that's a whole different aspect of our community that sometimes gets marginalized even within us, from accessibility, from inclusion, and just, you know, educating ourselves and being able and being open to constantly growing and understanding where our biases are, or where our blind spots are too. You know, that's a big piece, is like recognizing and awareness of where our blind spots are.
I think what's interesting too, and one thing that we often don't talk about, and it's unfortunate, but also something that we need to be focused on as a community, is that this understanding that LGBTQ people are everywhere, right? That it is not just a white gay male, it's not just a white gay female, it is not just a white black, or it's not just a black gay man, right? They are elderly folks, they're intersex children, there are gender nonconforming older adults, there are asylum seekers, and there are handicapped folks. There are folks with silent disabilities that we don't know about, and there are refugees. You know, some of the largest populations of Kurdish people that cannot talk about their identities in their communities. A huge Latinx population here in the area. They are not comfortable talking about their identities.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the little things that we can do in day-to-day engagement that show that when we can pull our resources together, and that we can show that there's strength and that there's community and belonging, that we can create those spaces of opportunity to what I would love to say is like to save life, right? Saving lives for LGBTQ plus identified people is really simple. It's the priority over everything else. It is to save their lives. And what we are doing is helping save their lives. When a human life is in jeopardy, any other law or religious practice goes out the window, right? And what we want to do is help people see that that there is a place for them, that they are here, and that they are loved, and that they are free.
Phil, if I may add, yeah. I think we are working on, I think, a really good example of how we can pull together resources. And I'm mindful that we're joined today by Jolene Sharp, who represents the Tennessee Council on Developmental Disabilities. And Jolene has certainly recognized a dearth of information about health resources for and resources more generally for LGBTQ members or LGBTQ people with disabilities, and I think in her work, and I'd like to ask, I think for her to speak more on this, but she's noticing more intersectionality between disability and the LGBTQ community, and has actually pulled together a coalition who are now engaged in ongoing conversations about identifying, uncovering the resources that are available and disseminating that information, and looking at opportunities to make spaces and resources more inclusive. So I think there's a prime example that's happening in real time. So.
Thank you, Delray. I really appreciate that shout out. And yes, so much of this is resonating because of what we are seeing at the council, which is we're hearing from folks who have developmental disabilities who also identify as a gender or sexual minority who are facing tremendous, tremendous barriers in accessing the resources and particularly the healthcare resources that they need. It's terrifying to be a person who with a disability may need access to specialists, may have some significant health issues, needing competent care, but also being terrified of being who you are with a medical provider who's responsible for your health and well-being. And those are the stories that we started to hear, and it became clear that there just really wasn't a lot happening at that very specific intersection. I'm very grateful to Delray, the work that Vandy is doing on this, and to a lot of folks who are coming together just to start a conversation about what does it look like to really collect resources and to identify where the gaps are for this particular group of folks who are facing a multitude of barriers. So I'm just really grateful for the space to start those conversations. And we know there's a lot of work to be done, but just getting folks sometimes in the room together is a really important first step that isn't as intuitive as it sounds.
Absolutely. One thing that Jolene shared some feedback in going into these sessions, and there was one comment from disability community. I don't know if this was one person or multiple people who said, I would rather have a healthcare provider who is LGBTQ competent and I could teach them about my disability rather than having someone who is more competent about my disability and having to teach them about my LGBTQ identity. And I found that incredibly revealing.
Wow.
Yes, that was one particular person's comment, but we have gotten similar sentiments from others, and that really helps inform how we direct that work then, right? Because if we know that that's the priority for folks in this community, then we can say, okay, well, how do we bring disability resources and training to providers who are LGBTQIA informed? Because then we can create a safe space for that specific intersection.
Thank you, Jolene. I'm actually really excited to participate in these conversations in the coming weeks. And so thank you for being here. Thank you very much for being here. As expected, Delray, you made a great segue into the next topic, which is ask what I can do to help and listen for the answer. And that's pretty, I mean, it's basically what Jolene just said. Jolene is talking about hearing from patients and hearing from people that she works with. And the response is exactly what you're seeing here. It's, I'm doing something to find a way to help and bring people together to have conversation. Showing up for a marginalized group that you don't identify with necessarily doesn't have to be daunting. The key to success is really focused on listening and learning, right? And for me, what I have found is that the best course of action is to read and learn as much as possible about the group that you'd like to support, and then the issues that group faces. And then that way you are able to introduce yourself to that group. You're able to volunteer for those services when the opportunity arises. You don't want to force yourself. And you can essentially already have enough information in your tool belt to fight the misinformation that might exist. Every queer person, every LGBT person in this community has their own story, and they have their own unique blend of challenges. And that means that that everyone can only truly understand or speak to or represent their own lived experience. But what you can offer is the advice and resources that about someone or about someone that you know or about something that you've read that relates back to directly to an experience that is in the best position to provide a solution. And so what I'd like to talk about now is what I can do to help. And so I'm gonna actually start with Joseph. And let's talk a little bit about the what I can do to help. All right. Let's talk a little bit about your time at Metro and some of the gaps that we were seeing from a service perspective for LGBTQ people. And it doesn't necessarily have to be service. I mean, it could be things like, I know you were very instrumental in ensuring that LGBTQ plus identified businesses had the opportunity for bidding contracts with Metro government. So, like, what are those opportunities where we hear that there's a need for help, and then we're creating action? And then as a follow-up to that, and this is going to be for each of the panelists today, as a follow-up to that, what is one way that we can be doing more in the future?
So, I'll tell you my experience too. So thank you for recognizing that. I've worked very closely with Metro government when I was there in the David Briley administration to make it so that LGBTQ could qualify for a specific designation as a business, and then that you could eventually record and discover what percentage of the population is actually providing services for Metro as a small business, et cetera. And you can, people actually look at those things just like women in small owned businesses or minority owned businesses, just as to, so that they can have a more inclusive, I can't think of like regular words. COVID is different. It's interesting. So we did that. And, what was interesting throughout that process was, one, I discovered that this had been a conversation that had been happening for years and had just really gotten nowhere. And what that came down to was the fact that nobody was, the advocates would come in, they would speak with people in government, they would speak with people in procurement, right? They would speak with elected representatives, and then the advocates would leave the room. And even when I was there, this first time that this started happening surrounding that conversation, the conversation that the people in charge, nobody was LGBT, right, was, how do we not do this? And so that goes back to, you have to have representation, right, in government. I was there, right? And so I could say, here's why we do this. Here's what's so important to, first of all, so that we can have information about, the fact that there are people who can provide these resources to Metro government in the LGBT community that we may not be looking at, one. But even beyond that, myself as a small business owner, the fact that I can be seen, the fact that people can say, oh, he's a business, and not only is he a business, but he's overcome, hardship and challenges because he's gay. And I do, I'm a white man, I recognize my privilege, but I work in politics in Tennessee. There have been plenty of challenges, right? So again, it's making sure that people are at that table. Now, I'll tell you, what was so helpful in that table was that David Briley, who's been an advocate of the LGBTQ community for a very long time, before it was ever popular for any political party to do so, empowered me to do that. And he said to me, you go in those meetings and you tell them that you speak for the mayor. And having somebody who was of ultimate privilege saying to me as his designee, a gay man, go into those meetings and tell the top financial leaders in our city, this is what we're going to do, was so helpful. And that it really is interesting, because to me that ties so much into what we've been talking about in, not just recruiting people, but empowering them to lead in those areas, and asking them, what we do, or what can we do to improve things, and then actually doing them, right? So not just saying, what can we do to help, listening to it, right? Because that, then you're in charge. You say, what can we do to help? That's yours. And then you have to listen. And then together you can do, right? So, we have an LGBT caucus right now. I think that that's really important to note in this conversation from a governmental perspective. This is, there's 5 people out of 40 on Metro Council who are gay or lesbian. And, I will point out all of those people are white, but it is important that there are 5 people who represent the LGBT community in Metro Council. And they do, they're empowered. I mean, 5 people out of 40 it's a voting block, right? That said, there are multiple ways to participate in Metro government. There are boards and commissions. There are, again, many opportunities for people of all socioeconomic backgrounds if they have the access to the people who can help make those decisions. So in that regard, be aware of those things and talk or be aware of those opportunities coming up. I'm happy to talk with anybody about how to look for those, and speak with the LGBTQ caucus. They meet regularly. You can attend those and have access there. But again, it all to me comes back to not just recruiting people, but listening to them and then empowering them and emphasizing what they say to you can help make a positive change and helping to make it happen.
Hey, Joseph, I just want to throw the 2 cents in. Even though you said they were, white, the important thing is the important part of that is that they are LGBT and they are trying to speak for all of us. Again, kind of like what we've said some earlier, that there are people out there, and they may be LGBT, but only thinking for their group or their race. And so to know that people are in those positions that are trying to help everybody makes, a difference, and I'll say probably in the Black community, they're white, but man, they trying to help us. So, it's just important that those people are focused on all of our needs.
Absolutely. And I couldn't agree with you more. And yes, Meredith, I see you say that we have to start somewhere. I say that they're all white, and I point that out not to be critical and not, I love actually all of these people.
No. Yeah, I didn't mean like that, but I just I know I mentioned earlier about, some organizations, and Meredith did too, being, white male dominated. But the point that now that those folks, including who you're talking about, are focused on everybody, that makes the difference.
Yeah. And again, while we have, I think what I'm trying to point out there is that while we have accomplished a great deal in having 5 people, there's more opportunity for improvement. How wonderful would it be if we had a trans person on council, or if we had, a Black bi person on council, or, who's empowered to speak their voice and represent that community. So we have a lot of accomplishments, but again, a lot of work to do.
Delray.
As you were talking about the importance of listening to people, I was transported immediately back to 2011. And I was at Out Central, actually working with a group of young people who were convening at a GLSEN youth leadership event. And for the very first time, we were going around the room and we were introducing ourselves. And for the very first time, I was hearing people introduce themselves as non-binary and using they, them pronouns. And it was my very first exposure. And I like to tell on myself because I think that my own, my own learning could be useful for other people. And as I was thinking about this story, I actually on my phone, I've got Facebook open, and our friend Jamie Combs posted a meme that says, "What if we were transparent about our own failures, not as some kind of performative vulnerability, but as an invitation to collectively destigmatize the messy process of lifelong learning?" And whoa, I love the confluence of things and how they coalesce together. Because as I listened to these young people in 2011, my internal dialogue, hearing people say, "I'm non-binary, my pronouns are they, them." Honestly, my internal dialogue was, wow, that's a lot. These young kids are extra or just being really extra right now. And I don't know what to do with this, but I had the presence of mind certainly not to say anything. And I love to tell on myself, because I really think this was a critical moment for me, because I spent the rest of the day with these young people. And as I got to know them again, which listening to the experiences of people who were not like me, I walked away from that experience acknowledging, respecting, and beginning to develop deep empathy and wanting to champion these young people who are claiming space for the very first time, and realizing that people were developing their own language to mirror their own experiences that is old as time. It's just, we're so fortunate now, and fast forward, we, hopefully we know a lot of non-binary people, right? But I just think about my own presence of mind, just to be able to sit and listen to someone I had no experience with, and eventually wanting to become such fierce champions for them, and just uniquely seeing people for who they are. And so, so I hope maybe that experience might shed some light for others. But I really point to that as a time, as a time when I was an active listener, and what a difference, that made for me personally.
Thank you so much. I'm realizing that it's 12:40, and we have one more breakout session that I have promised us for conversation, and so I want to jump into our next point of the new queer conscience, and it's kind of apropos, as I just talked about time. It's that we have limited time and resources, and that we have to use them both to lift each other up. So I think it's important to note that one of the key tools of oppression is turning marginalized groups against one another, right? Or against themselves internally. And it's easier to encourage people to tear themselves apart than to tear them apart yourself, right? So every culture has experienced a degree of infighting. Creating a movement in any given community is inherently chaotic. Creating change is also chaotic, and I can speak to that very truthfully. And it's a lot of work. But I think one of the things that we have to quickly learn is that in order to make the world safer for all queer people, is that we have to align ourselves and work to really, really get there together. And we may not necessarily agree on policies, procedures, or partnerships at the end of the day, but the more that we find ways to work together and align resources, we can use each other to lift the entire community up so that we can all succeed. And so that's really an idea around collective impact, is that we don't all necessarily need to agree but there is an opportunity for all of us to work together. And so I'm actually going to put someone on the spot here, and he's already smiling, so he knows. And he's probably cursing at me under his breath. Hi, Jordan. How are you?
Yeah, all those things are true, Phil.
So Jordan serves on our board at Inclusion Tennessee, and I wanted to quickly have him just kind of talk a little bit about some of the one of the projects that he's been working on with our organization, and the sort of the idea around collective impact and its importance. We are not necessarily we are launching this internally within our community in a couple weeks with the support of the Center for Nonprofit Management. But I wanted to talk a little bit, I want Jordan to just give a 3-4 minute highlight as to the idea of peacemaking circles, the idea of how we're going to utilize collective impact to use some of the resources that we have as a community to lift each other up. Sorry in advance.
That's okay. That's okay. Well, and important for me to say, I think, I've been fortunate to be a part of the board of In Tennessee and Inclusion Tennessee and developing this work. But, the groundwork for that was laid a long time before this piece of the work, actually. And it really generated from the community visioning project that happened a couple of years ago. And one of the clear kind of asks and needs from the community was for organizations to be more unified, to be able to kind of coordinate, come together around that common cause of being in service to the LGBT community here. So the collective impact work that Inclusion Tennessee is kind of moving forward is really designed to be a forum to bring all of our organizations, organizations who are solely dedicated to serving the LGBTQ population, but also organizations that serve our population with intention, maybe have specific programming, specific services that meet the needs of the population as well, to bring those organizations together to share some of that knowledge, that resource, right? So we think about time and resources, what more can we achieve when we kind of come together collectively to focus in on serving the community than we can kind of individually and separately. And, the sharing information piece is really important as a part of that. Do we have an understanding and a knowledge of everything that's happening across the community? There's some small kind of grassroots organizations that are providing really important service and community. How are they represented alongside our larger organizations with a bigger mission and faster resources? So the intention of the collective impact work, which we are calling Embrace, is to bring all of those organizations together and do some collaborative problem solving, actually, around the needs of the community. Yeah. And I think, Phil mentioned this idea of healing circles, and he and I were fortunate to take some circle training with the Circle Center in Nashville earlier on this year. And I think so much of that principle applies to the collective impact work. It's about creating, in that case, circles or spaces where everybody's voice is automatically included. You can choose not to share and have your voice in that space. But the expectation is that invitation is there for you to come forward and to speak. And, to be able to create some community healing as a part of that forum as well. I think the conversations we can have in those types of circles where we're sharing our experience, we're sharing perspective, we're maybe talking about those experiences that have been more challenging in trying to access support, resource, the community, times when we felt excluded or it's not worked as well, being able to have those conversations in a way that moves us forward. So that those experiences are validated and collectively we can move forward and really be in service and creation of a more kind of connected community for our LGBT folks here. And I realized I've said connected and community probably 10 times in those last few sentences, but they're important words, right? It's about what we can create together and collectively.
Thank you, Jordan, so much. And I'm so excited about this work that we are about to engage in. And it is truly going to be what I hope to be a change maker for our city and for our LGBTQ plus communities or organizations throughout the region. And so I'm thankful for your leadership on that. I think what the key takeaway from this is that for all of our organizations, there is limited time, right? We have limited time to make change. We have limited resources to make change, but we can do it better when we work together. We are stronger together. We can move forward together when we work together, right? I said together a lot, I get that. But I also said, it's, community together, it's all the same idea, right? Sometimes I wish, the other day I was writing something up for Inclusion in Tennessee, and I looked back at the writing and I was like, oh wow, community was used 37 times in the same letter. Okay, let's see what the source has to say. Nothing. Community is like its own word. So thought you'd kind of like that. On that note, I want to move into topic number 9, which is to support queer people whenever possible, wherever possible. Joseph, you made an interesting mention about some of the LGBTQ on businesses and their ability to bid within Metro government and that work that you've done. But I think it's also important to talk about LGBTQ on businesses throughout the city and supporting those businesses. And queer people need to do the same thing. And there are businesses that are throughout the city that are owned and operated by LGBTQI plus people. And some are members of the LGBT chamber, some are not. But it is supporting those businesses and supporting those individuals and supporting also the nonprofits and the initiatives of our community. It is donating money if there's a natural disaster. It's finding an organization that is queer friendly. It is donating clothing to a shelter that is LGBTQ plus supporting. There's a brand new, I believe it's a brand new trans closet that is running out of the table in here in Nashville with Reverend Don Bennett, where trans folks can get new clothes for their jobs. And so there's really unique opportunities, but you have to find ways to get connected into those. And so that's an opportunity to show up. It's an opportunity to support. And it's also an act of self-love. In a world, self-love, but also an act of love to the community, and show up for a community that where the world constantly tells us that we are not enough. So I know that we are at time, so I want to do a last breakout session. This is going to be 5 minutes. I know I'm looking at mostly off cameras, so I'm hopeful that people are available for a quick breakout session. But what we're going to do is have a quick conversation on these last 5 topics. Most
Split down the middle?
importantly, huh? I'm sorry?
Split down the middle?
Split down the middle, yes. The last 5 topics is what we're going to talk about. And the big question that we are going to walk away with and hopefully answer in 5 minutes is, what can I do to help? Break it out. organizations and how we can find ways to create the change that's so desperately needed throughout Middle Tennessee. Because I know that each of us have the opportunity to do so, and it's going to require each of us to come together to create that. So with that said, I do want to be respectful of time. We are a minute over. We have one more session left today at 2 o'clock, and we'll be back at that point. It'll be the same Zoom link, and I'll look forward to the conversation then. If you aren't able to join, then please don't have a good day. Have a great day. Have a day that matters. Have a day that makes an impact. And I look forward to connecting with you all soon. If not, I will see you at 2 o'clock. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Phil.
Thank
Thanks,
you so,
everybody.
and thank you so much to my panelists. Thank you all so much. I
Yes.
really appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Phil.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.